Hello, everybody. Do I start now? I'm going to share a screen. So before I go into that, let me introduce myself. Hello, everybody. This is very strange to be sitting in front of a computer, but I think that's going to be a new norm. So let's enjoy ourselves. So I'm going to start off with showing you my slides. Okay, so for now, I want to start my talk, which is actually in pursuit of the unknown. This is something that I choose to talk about today, about how we can be enterprising and how we can be innovative in our thinking. And I just want to share my story. And this is a very simple story. I mean, it doesn't happen all the time. It doesn't happen to everyone. And I guess we just take the opportunity when it comes. So for me, I just want to share you part of my journey and to tell you how I grew a company to what it is today. First of all, I want to tell you that I have a background in molecular biology. I am a trained scientist, and I've done a lot of work in science and in advancing biotechnology. And with that, I started off with first starting out to think about what kind of business I could start with. So it started off about 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, where we have an epidemic called the bird flu. So with that in mind, it started to let me think what are the gaps and the demands in our world. So with that, I want to tell you that first of all, I realized that there is a gap. And with that gap, I realized that what would be the demand and the things that we need to improve on. At a time, laboratory tests are done primarily in laboratories, in hospitals, and in research centers. So I'm always thinking of how can we forward ourselves to bring biotechnology into the front line so that epidemics, so that infectious disease or emerging diseases can be detected early and actions can be done faster. So this is also because of my background. I live in Singapore, I'm a Singaporean, and we had a tough time in 2003 when I incorporated and founded Veritas Laboratories. Now, with this, I just had to say that the idea of having a diagnostics capability outside the hospitals was a dream. At the time, it was not thought of. So there was an unmet need. And the need was to have a very accurate and a very reliable test. Today, with the pandemic, we know what PCR is. But during those days, about 15 years ago, nobody even know what PCR is. PCR is now the default, the gold standard in testing of COVID-19. But 15 years ago, because I was a molecular biologist, I knew about the technology. It was already in the laboratory. So we launched the first in the world PCR kit for H5N1, together with the institute in Singapore called A-Star. And then with that, we caught the attention of WHO. And with that, we went into market. It was very interesting. The demand was growing, but that's not the part. The part is the interest was very strong. People are learning new things. People are interested to know of new innovative ways to see how we can detect diseases earlier and reliably. At that time, met up with a European company. The name is called ST Micro Electronics. They have innovated a lab on chip that's able to detect and identify and differentiate diseases within a short time in a microchip that's as small as a fingernail. So with that in mind, we started to develop it. What was the first test that we developed? Well, at that time, naturally, it was influenza because of the outbreak of H5N1 in 2005. So we started to develop with various collaborators. And then in 2009, we announced the capability to detect flu and all flu types in a lab on chip here. With that, we went to market. During 2009, there was a H1N1 pandemic, and that brought us to the stage where we realized that there's a huge demand to actually do tests outside the conventional laboratory. So our dream was really to bring this test into the airports and into the checkpoints, into the places where people are traveling and going in and out of countries, so that we could detect people with infections and segregate them and treat them, and also to prevent further infection. So our mindset was to have a portable as well as an easy to use, user-friendly device. So from there, we started to innovate further. So from then on, we went on to think of other panels. So of course, with the influenza, we came out with other panels that's able to detect biological threats. So you can see in 2010, we developed a biological threat chip called VeriThreat. So VeriThreat, what is VeriThreat? It is a chip that can be used to detect and differentiate potential, what you call Cat A agents. These are biological threats. People who are thinking of using biological weapons. So for example, anthrax, example of smallpox. So we developed this chip that's able to be deployed into public areas where there are going to be concerns that there may be a potential biological threat. So we developed that, and then eventually we have deployed it in various big events in the world. So further on, we went on to develop more as the company starts to grow. First, we had a majority investment by ST Microelectronics, and then eventually we grew, and then continue to have more panels, and eventually we went to develop other panels like a food poisoning chip. It's called a foodborne chip. We have the fever chip that's able to detect various kind of tropical diseases. And then we also developed a multi-drug resistance tuberculosis chip. And then in 2014, we were acquired by a company in Singapore, a sovereign company called Temasek Holdings. And then 2 years ago, in 2018, we are acquired entirely by a Japanese MNC called Sekisui. So we are now fully owned by a Japanese company, Sekisui. And with that, we continue to provide solutions for different diseases. So we are now a Singapore-based, wholly owned subsidiary of the Sekisui Chemical. So we are part of a very big company that has various offices worldwide and also manufacturing sites. Sorry. So they can see from the map here that we have various locations in the US, in Europe, in China, in Japan, in Asia, example. So these are just information for you to see that how we have grown from a small company of only about 3 to 5 people to where we are today. So it has been a tremendous journey. So I want to talk a little bit about our technology. And I also want to inspire you that innovation and the commitment to be strong in understanding technology and bringing it into the market and bringing it into places that require such support is very, very vital in the days going forward, especially during this tough time. When we started to design this system, we imagined how we are going to use it. We imagine that the systems will be used at the airports when people come in from down the plane or going out in the plane, and we want to detect the diseases that might be a problem. So we're thinking of how can we do that? We cannot bring a laboratory into an airport, but can we bring a portable system, a medical device that could go in there and quickly, accurately, and safely and detect the disease in these people? So our mindset is to have something that's fast and that is safe, okay? So when we did this development, it's over many years, okay? So we've come up with our system called the VeriPlex system that's able to go from sample to answer. For now, we can go within 2 hours. We are able to do it fast, we are flexible, and then we are able to bring this, what you call a ruggedized device, into the point of need. The part that is interesting about this chip, or rather the consumable that goes in the chip, is this very, very high technology chip This is called a lab on chip. And with this lab on chip, this is actually the size of a fingernail. So this whole thing is what it is. We call it lab on chip because basically we have shrunk the entire laboratory into a size of a fingernail. So what you see here is a lab on chip that has combined two very advanced biotechnologies. One is the PCR, which is what we know today, the polymerase chain reaction, that's able to amplify DNA. And this part here, you see in blue window, is the microarray. And this microarray is what we put in DNA probes or DNA sequences in many, many sequences that's planted onto the microarray so that when the amplified PCR products go into the microarray, it is able to detect and tell you if the pathogen is present in the sample. Essentially, it gives you a library. So for example, if we put in sequences that will tell you the person is suffering from coronavirus, or if it's going to be SARS or MERS or the current SARS-2 that we have, we can differentiate them. Or we can put in the DNA sequences for different kind of tropical diseases. For example, you can put in malaria, you can put in dengue, you can put in Japanese encephalitis, and all chikungunya, yellow fever, you can put all that into the microarray. And with these samples going in here, after the amplification of the DNA, you can actually see them light up, the ones that's present. Because we design it in a way when something is there, it will go in and complement the sequence so that it can be detected. And we have a software, a computer would then tell you within seconds whether this detection, this sample has which disease. So let me just go to the next slide. So we started to develop many kinds of panels. As I mentioned just now, we have the influenza panel that's able to differentiate and identify different influenza A subtypes. So it's H1, H1N1, for example, H3N2, H5, H5N1, we can segregate them, we can identify it. For biological tract chip, we call it VeriTract. We are able to detect, differentiate, and identify biological agents such as anthrax, bubonic plague, and smallpox, for example. So one of my favorite panel and chip is actually the multi-drug resistant tuberculosis chip. This chip is able to detect from a patient sample in a short 2 hours, not just the infection, but if the person is suffering from a drug-resistant tuberculosis, mycobacterium. So this is something that is very precious when it comes to saving lives and giving the right treatment, because we know if the person is going to be resistant with which drug, so that we could give the right medication. So going this, I want to tell you when we first started, this is in 2009, pandemic. I want to start this by telling you this story before I go into this COVID-19 situation that we have today. We started off designing a flu chip that will detect the pandemic H1N1. So very early on, 10 years ago, we already came up with a chip design that's able to detect all the potential strain subtypes that can infect human and potentially be a pandemic potential. So we have put in H1N1 when pandemic came out in 2009. So you can see from the screen here that we can differentiate all the subtypes. So you can detect flu A, B, H1, 3, 5, 7, 9, flu B, different subtypes, and also detection of the H1N1 pandemic flu. So this is how we design it. As I mentioned to you, we put the DNA sequences onto the microarray, which is the library. We put in all different sorts of DNA sequences that will identify and tell you what is the DNA sequence as in the sample, or rather the pathogen. So with that, you can see the different pattern that when the DNA sequences light up, the software is able to identify if the person has H1N1 or H1N1 pandemic flu, H3N2, H5N1, H7, H9N2, for example, or flu B. So with this in mind, I want to tell you that we started already 10 years ago developing a solution to look for a disease. So what happened? So this is in way back in 2009, the press release and all that we have done 10 years ago. So what happened in 2020? So I'm going to quickly go in and tell you, as soon as we know that there was a crisis, and as soon as we know that there potentially could be an epidemic, of course, at that time, we didn't know it's going to be a pandemic. The first case was detected in Singapore on 23rd of January. But before that, we already know there are infections, okay, outside of Singapore. So we quickly developed in the beginning of January, and by 24th of January, we announced that we have developed the chip that's able to detect the coronavirus. At that time, we were not sure which one is the one that's causing the problem. Was it the MERS from many years ago, or was it the SARS from 15 years ago, or was it something new? So we put all the sequences into the library or into the microarray, and then we deploy this. So with this announcement, we have our first few customers who heard about this, and we deploy this in the beginning of February. So after the deployment, very quickly it was put in a good use. And I can tell you the dream of having diagnostics done, or rather molecular diagnostics, which is very difficult to do, to be done at the checkpoints, which is our dream. I mentioned to you in 2006, where our dream is to be able to put a portable system that is going to be able to go into the point of care or point of need, for example, at the airports. And indeed, in 2020, with this coronavirus situation, this chip was deployed in all the land, sea, and air checkpoints in Singapore. So we started to do that, and in the beginning of March, we were starting to get samples, and we were able to detect accurately and rapidly people coming in with the disease. Very quickly, we went in to develop more and more solutions that would cater to different customers, whether they need to have even a faster test, or whether they have the need for a machine, or they are very flexible. It depends. So we went on to continue to innovate more. So these are the press release that we've done together with the government of Singapore, and these are the nasal swab points, swab tests that's done at the checkpoint when they enter into Singapore at the different gantries. You can see from the pictures that they are using the chip for this. This is the test, as I mentioned, the chip, and it was advertised in the Singapore's website. I have it inside here that you can go into and have a look. I'll give you an example of the test report. Okay, so as I told you, it's all in the software. We have it detected by a camera that's able to look at the different DNA spots, and we can give you a generation of a report telling you if the disease is there or not. So you can see from here, this is the chip result from one of the samples. Thank you very much. So should I stop sharing now? Yes, I have a question here. So how did the Singapore economy help to develop the company? I can tell you, we are a very small country. Singapore is extremely small, and we have been very strong in innovation and technology. So for the last 10, 15 years, we've been working very closely with the Singapore government, with the different institutions, and we work very, very strongly together to come up with ideas and solutions. And then we of course did not expect we did not expect this pandemic, but I can tell you, nobody is really ready for this. But with the experience that we have, and with the strong collaboration with the different agencies in Singapore, and with the help of the Singapore government, I think we have done our best. Okay, thank you. Say goodbye. Thanks a lot for listening to me. Bye-bye.